Welcome to the show. My name is Charlton with Big C. This is Charlton and Big C Sports coming to you worldwide on the Big C Sports Network, on the #1 network in the United States of America. And Big C Sports has been voted the #1 sports show in the universe, according to Big C and them good old boys down south. I want to say bienvenidos to all of our listeners in Latin America, also across the pond, in London, England, as well as Paris, France. Of course, you good old boys from Africa, you know we love the Big C tribe, but we love them down south. Still knowing we love more than the good old boys down south in the land of the free and the home of the brave when it's beautiful. September the 13th, 2018, in the land of Charlton and Big C Sports. Big C, I think he's out fishing right now. There's a lot of weather going on the southeast. And just for a day like today, doing a sports show, when we know that the hurricanes are coming up on the Carolinas, it's oftentimes there are more important things in life that you got to pay attention to. It's almost like having parties and doing sports talk when we have, hurricanes happening in the south, or even big fires or earthquakes, God forbid, out here on the West Coast. But I know sometimes that sports can take your mind off of things. I do want to say that's why we love doing the show, but I know there's more important things than just doing a show. And that's why I always want to tell people, live your life. You never know what's going to happen to you, but if you can always expect the best. Just in thoughts about what's going on tonight in the Carolinas. There are so many people that are just going to be displaced. There are people who have already gotten out, and there are people who they don't heed the warnings. So it doesn't matter what you say to them. They're going to do what they want to do anyway, whether it's faith or prayer. I mean, football is great. Basketball, baseball is great. Soccer is great. It's all great. But at the same time, when you have storms happening and you have people being displaced, you got to have a little bit of heart for people too. I do want to say today's segment is sponsored by your Northern California Cadillac dealers, home of the all-new Cadillac Escalade, the standard of the world. And when you go by and test drive yours, tell them Charlton and Big C sent you. I want to start today's show doing just to have empathy for people. It means to pretend or just imagine yourself being in their shoes. I go back to the 1989 Loma Prieta earthquake. It was during the World Series with the Oakland A's and the San Francisco Giants. There are a lot of people in the Bay Area, and in fact throughout the world, they know where they were at that time. And I'll never forget, it was the great Al Michaels that was doing the play-by-play. And when it happened, I remember doing some work. I was at the office in Northern California, and the building started shaking. And I remember when the building started shaking, there were a lot of people that were saying, what in the world's going on? They had no idea what was going on. I didn't know what was going on because a lot of the communication was lost. Well, when we talk about how do you reach out to people, and Big C talked about it yesterday, everybody can't always get away. I remember I had a telephone line back in the day. It was called ExecuLine. Well, AT&T wasn't working. I believe MCI was not working, and there were some other major networks that were not working because the earthquake had knocked out communications. But I had this small mom and pop phone company called ExecuLine, and I remember I was able to call and reach my family. Their phone lines were not flooded like the major networks. So what's going on tonight? I was watching a lot of the excellent reporting by Don Lemon, Chris Cuomo for CNN News, and a lot of the other weather channels that are out there, doing their reports, telling people how difficult it is. I know there was a time earlier in the day where the wind was just at 50 miles per hour. So if the wind's blowing at 50 miles per hour, they were showing that there was a flag that was actually torn. And there were still numbers of people that chose not to get out. They chose not to evacuate. Well, unlike the Loma Prieta quake in the Bay Area in 1989, there was no warning for the earthquake other than a few seismologists detecting some rumbling in the ground, and we know the calamity that happened. But the great thing, not that you could say it's a great thing, the great thing about people that happened after we had the Loma Prieta quake here in Northern California, people came together with their neighbors. They helped a lot of people, whether it's with the rescue efforts. I remember there were people making sure their neighbors had some food, making sure their neighbors had something to eat, making sure they had a place to stay, because oftentimes people who are affected the most, they're not able to help themselves as much. I know We are told, pull yourselves up by your bootstraps, that everyone should heed the warnings, especially when the officials are telling you to get out. Not everybody can. If you're an elderly person, and maybe you don't have family around that can check on you, what do? They may not be young and able-bodied like a lot of young people are that can get in their car and drive. There's money in the bank. And I still remember, even if you had money in the bank, there were so many people at times that were trying to get out and get the help that gas stations would run out of gas. So what do you do if you're in that situation where you need gas and you can't get it? I just feel for the people that are going through this in the Carolinas, and I hope that with just having that reflection, as people want to find out about sports, there are a lot of teams that have canceled their games, and they're moving their games because this weekend it's not great to do it. East Carolina, they're canceled the game against Virginia Tech, canceled this weekend. And Virginia Tech is the same team that jumped on Florida State earlier in the season, and they're off to a good start. A lot of people thought that maybe Florida State would win that game. So the Virginia Tech players, like a lot of people who also have a heart, and they realize they can't go out and do everything and play a lot of games, especially when you're having natural disasters happening as we speak. They're being told, get up and leave. So for a lot of these players, college players, that will do their part to help people in situations, I'm going to ask each person that follows Big C Sports, what are you doing to help people? I know we can do PSAs where we can reach out to people and tell them that we're going to help you as much as possible, but we could all do something like checking on your neighbors. Going back to Loma Prieta earthquake, a lot of people did that. Remember, the World Series was canceled. They postponed it for about a week. It was actually, they were in San Francisco. It was called the Bay Bridge Series in Oakland, and then the San Francisco Giants at the old, Candlestick Park. And the Coliseum, of course, is still there. But they postponed that game. Now, what I learned about tragedy, now I wasn't caught up in the Loma Prieta. Thank goodness I didn't get injured. But I did have the ground move under my feet, and I was in a building that was swaying from left to right. And when I say swaying, it felt like it was going about 2 feet in each direction. So you get a little bit of, you get a little bit lightheaded not knowing where you are. You know what's going on at that time. But the people that pulled together, they also were told, well, why do people live in the Bay Area? You know it's going to happen eventually. Why would you even live in the Bay Area? As if it's their fault. I remember the top deck of the Bay Bridge had collapsed onto the bottom deck. Well, when you hear that on the radio, I thought, oh my God, how did that happen? And you think the worst. You think maybe the whole thing. But it was just a deck of it had collapsed onto the bottom portion by the act of God. There was not more loss of life on that bridge. And then we know the Embarcadero Freeway, if you're familiar with San Francisco, that runs right along the pier by the ferry building. That used to be a double-decked highway. But they no longer have that because it wasn't safe. It was built in landfill. They tore it down. And now it's just a single lane highway, and it goes left, right and left, of course. And that's how a lot of people get around from the ferry, from the bay. You cross the Embarcadero, and then you're right in the heart of downtown San Francisco. So listening to Don Lemon and Chris Cuomo, how they were saying how some of the reports from the Carolinas is that they were actually showing up. They were showing up to give a real life story. Now, I credit so much what those two gentlemen do because they could have stayed in the CNN studios, but they went out among the people and made sure that they gave a live report for people. So I'm just appreciate people like them that did that. I also want to acknowledge how does sports play a part in helping people. I look at West Virginia. I look at North Carolina. If you think about North Carolina State, of course their games are canceled, but there are people who will also say, I'm not going to leave because I don't think it's dangerous to be around here. But at universities, two major universities that play Division I football, they decided to cancel their games. Why? Because when you have a game, you have people showing up. You have people that may get caught in the eye of the storm. So for the people that don't heed the warning, and you have universities that oftentimes will get criticized, maybe they put too much emphasis on sports, maybe they're not finding a way to pay athletes, and people know that's a bad thing. But at least I want to give some of these schools credit for saying, you know what, there's more important in life than just playing a game. So for West Virginia, North Carolina, I appreciate them putting a halt to that game coming up, and they can figure out what to do later in the season. Virginia had just beaten up on Tennessee last week, and then North Carolina, they lost to Cal Berkeley out here in Northern California. But North Carolina State actually is the team that had the cancellation with West Virginia. Also canceled this weekend, University of Central Florida and North Carolina. Now, North Carolina played at Cal Berkeley last weekend. But give me a time to reflect here what a lot of people can do. We know when it was Southern California that was hit by fires, there were really no cancellations of games because there was at that time in the summer where they didn't have to. But I do recall up north, it was Cal Berkeley playing Washington State last year, and I think Cal Berkeley gave Washington State their first loss. It was after Washington State had knocked off USC up in the Palouse on a weekend, I think a Friday night game. So they were still living high in the hog from that. They went to Cal Berkeley and they got blown up, but there was so much smoke in the air. It was called an unhealthy air day at the Coliseum at Cal Berkeley. And no matter what you say, that game could have been canceled because how much money is worth the health problems that come from breathing in a copious amount of smoke. Plus, on top of that, you have people that are getting in their cars, are riding BART, trying to get to a football game, and who knows how much more danger they would have had if a fire jumps. Not that it would jump from Napa over to Berkeley, but just because of the fire departments that had to go from all over Northern California getting there. When you're trying to compete with 50,000 fans at a football game, it also ties up traffic. So I thought that was irresponsible for the Pac-12 last year, as well as Cal Berkeley for not canceling that game against Washington State. But again, East Coast, West Coast mentality, a little bit different, all because of the Hurricane Florence. That's why a lot of these games have been postponed. So of all of the people who made those right decisions, I just appreciate the fact that they did that, and we know that it's so important, and we want to do our part to make sure that people are happy about that. I want to bring up just two games that are coming up too this weekend for college football. I know there's so much talk about who the top teams in the country are. Some people say it's got to be Alabama. Others up north say no, it's Ohio State if you watch the way they play. And then some of the players in the Midwest, they say it's Oklahoma with the way they beat up on UCLA, a proud team, at least a once proud team from the Pac-12 conference. Texas versus USC. I believe USC leads that total lifetime series 5-1. The only loss was when USC lost that magnificent championship game at the Rose Bowl. It was Vince Young totaling over 400 yards of total offense against the USC Trojans, Reggie Bush, and they had Matt Leinart, the two back-to-back Heisman Trophy winners. But Texas came to the Rose Bowl and snapped a 34-game win streak for the Trojans. The mighty Trojans went down at that game. And now, that was Vince Young's coming out party. It's amazing that Vince Young wasn't more highly touted by the NFL with the way that he played back then in that game, setting records. Keep in mind, Vince Young had that same type of performance the year before against Michigan at the Rose Bowl. Same Vince Young that was maligned as an NFL player. I think he went 36-19 as an NFL starter. But that put Vince Young on the map. Mack Brown got a win, got a national championship. He had snapped Pete Carroll's win streak. Southern California was always playing for Pac-12 championships back in 2003, all the way up to 2008. But that 2004-2005 team, they were so dominant. That was a team that came back from beating Oklahoma in the Orange Bowl for the national championship. It was 55-19. That same USC team that featured Lindell White, Reggie Bush, and Matt Leinart was up against Adrian Peterson for the Oklahoma Sooners, and I believe White was their quarterback. So and he had come off of a Heisman Trophy, candidate also. So those programs at Southern Cal, they are more in the past than they are in the future. I know they want to turn things around with Helton, but Pete Carroll's a little bit different kind of coach. He recruits differently. He goes into the inner city and grabs a lot of kids that try to make their life a lot better. So that Texas game and USC game, what does it mean? We know Texas, they struggled out of the block. USC struggled out of the block, being shut down by Stanford 17-3. Texas lost their first game to Maryland in a game that they were expected to win. And they nearly won their second game. At least they should have won by a larger margin. So you have two teams that are 1-1, two once proud programs. Even when you look at whether they win year after year, as far as marquee programs, you can't find any programs that are much better than USC and Texas, known as the Southwest, formerly Southwest Conference for Texas, now the Big 12. USC at one time was part of the Pac-8 conference, and then they merged into the Pac-10. Now they are part of the Pac-12. What do you have at stake? Is it the state of California, which is the largest state in the union, population-wise, versus the state of Texas, which is the largest state in the union landmass-wise? Who has better football, California or Texas? There are so many people who debate that fact. Who are the better players in college football? If you look at USC, it would be hard-pressed to say that the best running back out of the history of the Southern California Trojans was not Marcus Allen. Some people would say Mike Garrett, and others might say O.J. Simpson. And if you're new, the young kids might say, no, it was Reggie Bush. Well, when you think about how great Charles White was and Anthony Davis, I would say USC has it at the tailback position. There was Ricky Williams, who played at Texas. Earl Campbell played at Texas. So they've had a lot of great players that played at Texas. But when it comes to athletes, I would give USC the edge. But what happens this weekend down in Texas, in Austin, Texas, which is kind of Silicon Valley of the Southwest? I think there's a lot of pressure on both programs. But I'll tell you why USC has less pressure than Texas. Well, they had to win last year. The only time that they went to a game against Texas that they really didn't have it wrapped up until the end. But that game went to overtime and USC won it, even though Barkley had quite a few turnovers. So Texas had a lot of players come out, a lot of alumni, a lot of Hollywood movie stars. Matthew McConaughey was there. Of course, Vince Young on the sideline, Vince Young. And then with USC, you always have great athletes and movie stars, from Snoop Dogg all the way to several other celebrity type figures, Denzel, that show up. A lot of them go and show up at the games for the Trojans. In Texas, I doubt if you'll get a lot of Southern California brethren flying down to Texas to see this game. It would be different if both teams were 2-0, but being 1-1 takes a little bit of the shine off of that game. Now, in my opinion, Texas, I don't want to say this, but I'm not partial, but I am a West Coast guy. I would love to see USC win that game. I think they have better talent, but I also know there's something called Texas justice, and a lot of good boys driving through Texas, Big C. I know you'll understand that too. There's something called Texas justice, and a lot of people thought that maybe Texas got jobbed a couple of times that they played USC, and a lot of people thought the USC game, thought that in the Rose Bowl, there was a play right before halftime where the Texas running back, his knee was down on the ground, and you'll hear more of that coming up this weekend as they build up to that game. This game's build-up will be more images of that Rose Bowl in 2005 than it will be this season, because both teams are not as impressive, at least in the early two games. But Texas, in my opinion, they will be the home crowd favorite, of course. That means they'll also get the benefit of the doubt of the call. Instant replay will play a factor in this game. We've all seen instant replay. Do we really need instant replay? I think they should have a game clock on the instant replay. If you have a thought whether it's a catch or is it not a catch, was it in bounds, was it out of bounds? Did he have possession before he hit the ground or did he not? Well, that's a split-second decision for the crew on the field. Why does it take instant replay about 3 to 5 minutes to figure it out? Something nefarious might be going on, and a lot of people don't want to admit that. But I would just rather say, if you can't call it right on the field, just replay's not going to help make it any different. If we can see with our own eyes what they're telling us we did not see, I think for that reason, I don't want to make any prediction, but everything's favoring Texas, at least just for this game, because they're at home. They need to win more than Southern California, just for trying to get another notch in the victory column when it comes to this series. Again, I hope Southern California prevails. I think they're the better team. When I look at what we talked about just the other day, Boise State, ranked number 17 in the country, playing at number 24 Oklahoma State, down in Stillwater. That Oklahoma State team can flat out pass the ball, but so can Boise State. There's a perception that Boise State doesn't play the same caliber football as some of the teams in the Pac-12 or in the Big 12. Well, I kind of doubt that. I think Boise State will show well. It depends on how games are called. I think their record non-conference, I'll never forget how they beat Oklahoma down in the Fiesta Bowl several years ago when Adrian Peterson was actually at Oklahoma. They also knocked off Georgia down in the Georgia Dome just a couple of years ago, and that's an early kickoff game of the season. And Boise State has always represented well. They've knocked off Oregon. They've knocked off Washington. In fact, they've beaten Oregon twice. So they've been there playing Pac-12 teams. I think they will hold their own in this game against Oklahoma State. A game that we talked about before, LSU with Coach Algeron. Listen, he's ranked number 12 in the country. They had that big win against Miami, playing against number 7 Auburn. Auburn has to win this game, obviously, to stay in national championship contention, as well as LSU. But the team that wins will still have that national championship bowl consideration. I think no matter what people think, I think Auburn might have the edge just because they've already been battle-tested against the Huskies, which I think are a better team than Miami. But Miami put up 77 points last week on a lesser opponent. I still think Auburn has the edge being at home. This is a big game they're saying. Allegedly, Ohio State versus TCU. TCU's ranked 15th in the country. Ohio State's ranked number 4 in the country. And some people say they're number 1 or 2 because they're very loaded. That game's down in Fort Worth, Texas, in a smaller stadium than what you have in Ohio State in the Horseshoe. So I look for Ohio State to play the way they're capable of playing. I don't think TCU will match up with them physically, but speed for speed, TCU has some speed, but they'll probably wear down by the fourth quarter. Wouldn't be surprised if Ohio State won that game, not by more than 10, but definitely it could be 8 or 9 points. I might be wrong. They might be more than that. I think if there's a chance for TCU to win it, you have to have rain, you have to have turnovers, and that's always that Texas home cooking that a lot of people know it exists. For people to say it doesn't exist, there's a lot of politics in Texas football, even if it's high school. But I still want to give that edge to the Ohio State Buckeyes. Urban Meyer, this is his last game, coming up on suspension for the I guess covering up or not being transparent enough about what happened with his former coach and then the coach's ex-wife. So I hope that that's behind everybody, not to excuse Urban Meyer. But at some point in time, it's not fun being accused of doing something you did not do. Ignorance and bad judgment is not a crime. If that were a crime, there'd be a lot of people in trouble if we got in trouble for being ignorant and having bad judgment, not making light of anything. But I just don't want to see Urban Meyer being treated as if he's the one who committed the assault, because he did not. And yes, they could have done a better thing, but all of us can do better things in life. But I think that this is a game that Ohio State would be so focused. If they lose, it's an upset. I don't think that's going to happen. I do want to say that sports is a billion-dollar industry, and boys and girls sports is the foundation to this billion-dollar industry. For every athletic and sporting event, you need athletic and event insurance. We work with Ben and Mark. They work with Big C Sports. Whether you're an NFL team, a pro team, a collegiate team, a high school team, or your mom and pop soccer leagues, when you reach out to them, let them know that Big C sent you. I guess, again, looking at the weather reports, I just want to take the time to say, I know there's a lot of storming that's coming in tonight, and because of that, I just want to just keep saying hearts and prayers with all the great people of the East Coast shoreline, all the way from eastern Georgia up to the Carolinas. I just hope that there's a lot of people who can get out of there and have a safe haven until things get back to better, at least until that storm is over. And again, I hope a lot of people can realize that. I do want to bring up something that I think is important, and it may be even flippant to say this. In this world of dress code, I want to challenge young people. I want to challenge people, especially the people with the swag look. The people that walk around with their pants down and they think it's cool. I think it's one of the dumbest looks that I've ever seen. Now, I know some people get offended at that because they like looking dumb. But what child, what teenager would not be embarrassed if their parent came to their school with their underwear hanging out, pants down behind the buttocks, or sometimes down to the knees, and they think it's cool? There's no way you could think that's cool. I want to challenge young people without chastising as much, because some people would say, well, you don't understand where I come from. I understand when I see underwear instead of pants. I understand that. And sometimes you need someone to tell you when it's stupid. It's a stupid look. Now, I may come under some criticism for saying this, but there's a lot of clothing makers who make money by having kids look dumb in their clothing, looking ignorant with their underwear hanging out. I would hope that some of these clothing makers dress your own kids that way when you think it's cool. It's not cool. There's some major clothing lines. Some very famous people that have made a fortune over selling kids garbage clothing of all colors. I would hope that we could just have a consciousness. I would hope to get some help from mainstream media. Can we ask men and women, boys and girls, to have more class in how we carry ourselves and conduct ourselves? Pull your clothing up on you. Now, maybe I'm a little bit old school, so maybe I'm the guy that's saying, get off my lawn. Okay, maybe I am saying get off my lawn. But I would love for the young people to pay attention to what's happening with this storm that's happening on the Carolinas. You'll see the emergency crews that are out saving people. They're not swagging. They don't walk around with their underwears hanging out when they're the fire department. They make sure they have a dress code because it represents the company they work for. And that's primarily the taxpayers. So with Friday Night Lights coming up tomorrow, and we'll do that as we always do on Big C Sports to honor some of the top 10 high school football teams in the country, or even the top 5 from each region, north, south, east, and west. I would like to ask you young people, to have let's make a sea change. Let's tell all of the people, the clothing line makers, that make your clothing so that you look ignorant when you're walking around with your underwear hanging out, the same way you would not want your parents to do when they leave for work in the morning or when they show up at your school for a student council meeting. You wouldn't want them walking around with their underwear hanging out. Boys and girls are doing that. Well, who taught you that ignorance? That actually comes out of the penitentiary, whether you know that or not, but that's where it came from. I would hope that we can ask all of our media brethren to just challenge our youth today to walk around with a customer-friendly mentality, or a clothing-friendly mentality, or a what they call casual attire mentality. We can do that. We can make sure that people look better. I see that because when I watch the reporters like Don Lemon and Chris Cuomo, when they're out doing their report, they're not just sagging. They have a way of dressing that I hope that young people will catch. I'm saying that so much more because around the AAU here in California, I see a lot of kids that they don't have that father figure in their lives. Not that mothers can't do their own, or sometimes they're single fathers too. But I would just like to tell young kids, it's okay to pull your belt up on you. It's okay to look like you have some class. I don't think any of us would respect, irrespective of your opinion of this person, if POTUS stood up at the podium in the White House and he had the sag look and he had his pants down to his knees and he's holding his underwear. People would say, what an idiotic look. Well, he's done things that are idiotic, whether you like it or not, like the line fact-checking and all that. Fact-check, just Google it. But I think that's something, and it's just been bothering me some. I'm talking to a lot of business people that I respect, and I wanted to get that message out there. As you watch the class of the emergency crews that are trying to help people and evacuate people, there's a decorum. Now, I want to go a little bit further. When it comes to being rescued, we know that people need that. And so when you have an appearance that doesn't look as threatening, it's a little bit easier. Okay, so I just want to have a call if we could have a social consciousness to business casual in schools. I know a lot of schools fight the dress code, but it's okay to wear slacks pulled up on your body and maybe a nice button-up shirt or a nice t-shirt, as long as you respect your parents when you do it. Now, I brought up POTUS about having his pants down and how ignorant that would look, okay? I mean, people might laugh at that, but it would be ignorant. But also what I think is very disingenuous is an ignorant statement that was made. I know we talk about sports and politics. We talk about so many things that bring our country together. But I was listening to a study that was done, and it came out that George Washington University, Howard University in Cambridge, Massachusetts, they had a study on what happened in Puerto Rico when they were going through their hurricane and the loss of life. Well, unfortunately, over 2,975 people lost their lives. I think POTUS was saying that's fake news. POTUS said only between 8 and 64 people had lost their lives. So that's saying that the officials that work at Harvard and also George Washington are fake news. They're not fake news. There is a great loss of life in Puerto Rico, and I would hold the White House accountable to the anathema against the emergency crews that go out to save people. There were more than 64 lives lost in Puerto Rico. So when you say, well, what would POTUS look like with his pants down? I think we just saw that again. And I would hope that POTUS can atone. Nobody's perfect, but that's something that makes you go, wow, how disheartening would just tell people who know that they lost loved ones, that you're saying that only 8 to 64 people's lives were lost, and a lot of people know they had more services than that, and more people that not even accounted for. So that to me was very disheartening, but I do want to say our thoughts and prayers are still with the people of Puerto Rico, as well as just with the people of the Carolinas. So back to the kids and their thoughts of how they dress. The NBA can be an example, especially men of color. I know the swag look is for all cultures, but I want to speak to people, men of color at this moment in time, because we can be the vanguards. And not one of us can point to a great speech by the late Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and watch him doing his speech about I have a dream with his pants down with the swag look, holding his underwear up and trying to be respected. That's not a respectful look. Even for the dumb guys that think it is and they sell that garbage to our young kids, what would a father think if a young man came home wanting to date his daughter and he's holding his underwear in his hands? I'm being real about that. For the fathers who think that's cool and the grown men who think it's cool, how would you feel if some young man comes to your house and he wants to ask you, can he take your daughter to the movies, your teenage daughter, and he shows up with his pants hanging down and he's holding his underwear? How many of you fathers that condone this sag look would approve of that? You know you would have to be more ignorant than you are to say you're okay with that. You shouldn't be okay with that. I'll flip it also for women, because I see some women doing the same thing. And I think sports people can bring it out and let people know that's not cool. How many men or how many women would appreciate if your daughter's going out to the movies or just going on a get together or lunch or meeting up with her friends, and she walks out of your house and her pants are down and her underwear are hanging out and she's grabbing her underwear to look like it's cool? It's not cool. It's a dumb look. So whoever told us that it's cool, they lied to you. You know they lied to you because you would not appreciate someone coming to your house looking that way. I'm very passionate about that, especially as I watch these emergency crews trying to help people save lives with the hurricanes coming. It's just something for thought. I would like to propose a business casual look for schools and young people. You know you can do it. So let's just start telling young people it's not cool to walk around looking that way. Whether you think I'm one of those old guys that says, get off my lawn, maybe I am. But I do know it's okay to pull your pants up. It probably also makes the grandparents proud. I do want to jump on another topic as well. Today's a tough show because watching everything that's going on the East Coast, knowing that a lot of people, they care about sports, but sports people have a consciousness also, and I think we can help if we show that we care. I got to bring up this thought that we've been talking about with the NFL, the Oakland Raiders, Jon Gruden. We talked about the Pittsburgh Steelers having that in-house fighting, whether Le'Veon Bell comes back or not. Will he come back to the Steelers? They're blaming him for losses. Roethlisberger throwing 8 interceptions in 2 games. There's some offensive linemen saying, well, who is Le'Veon Bell? Who is he? Well, Jon Gruden just threw Derek Carr under the bus because he publicly criticized Carr for not throwing the ball accurately or correctly, or not knowing how to find the open receiver. Why would he throw his own $100 million quarterback under the bus in public? That's something you do in private. That would be like criticizing, like a husband and wife may have disagreements at home. You don't get on TV and radio and shout down your wife and say how inappropriate she is or whatever you want to do that may be meant as constructive criticism. You don't do that to the whole world. That's something you do in private. I said also, I think with the Oakland Raiders, there are a lot of grown men that won't tell you this because they want to keep their jobs. But when Gruden got rid of Khalil Mack, the best player on their team, I think a lot of players were offended by that, and they're still offended by it. So I think he's lost that locker room. Will he get it back? I don't know, but why would you throw your quarterback under the bus? You know he doesn't even look you in the eye when you talk, and I think that last pick was kind of retribution just by saying, you can't tell me what to do. But one more thing about Mark Davis. How many parents out there try to teach our kids something, right or wrong? There's a certain age that kids can get, teenagers, where they start smelling themselves. And I mean that in all sense of the words, Big C. But they start smelling themselves, and they think they know more than the parents. How many people have been in that situation? I know I had been. There was a time I thought I knew more than my parents knew. Even though they kept a roof over my head, kept food in my belly, There was a time I thought I knew more than them because I was a knucklehead. Well, what makes Mark Davis think that he knows more than his late father, Al Davis, who fired John Gruden? There are a lot of reasons that he let him go. Now, just like some kids, they think they know more than their parents. They'll come back and say, I'm going to make decisions different than my parents. And as they get older in life, they'll realize if they had parents that were full of wisdom, they were trying to save them from some heartache and pain that some kids want to learn the hard way. And that's why sometimes the jails are full. Some kids would rather learn the hard way than to listen to the wise parents that may talk to them and sometimes chastise them. Davis didn't listen to his father. His father got rid of Gruden. Gruden's gotten rid of a lot of players that play for the Oakland Raiders. And I think they've turned their back on the black hole. Whether people believe that or not, I think you will see that in time. And I wish the Raiders well. But again, Gruden's record's 81-81. Google it, outside of the team he had with Tony Dungy that went on to the Super Bowl. So I just want people to keep that in mind. I also want to touch on just a few things today. I want to congratulate the WNBA champions, the Seattle Storm. And they swept the Washington Mystics last night for the WNBA title to win the third title in the most titles of the WNBAC. You know, that team, the Seattle professional team, I think they've done a lot for that great Northwest. I think it's also a prelude. The prelude I think we saw was an NBA team coming back to the state of Washington. I think if you saw what they did last night on the road, a sweep, and they celebrated back at home in Seattle, it's time for the NBA to come back to the great state of Washington, the city of Seattle. I think that would be great. I don't know what team would leave another team in the NBA, but there are some teams that just don't support their franchises. I think Seattle has shown that they're worthy of having some NBA basketball back in that region. They'll also capture the great Northwest region in the southern part, the Southwest region of Canada with the Vancouver, British Columbia fans. So it's a win-win for all people, and I would hope they could do that. I want to also acknowledge Breanna Stewart. She was the game's MVP. She now has as many WNBA titles as the great LeBron James. LeBron James, they have the same number of titles. So congratulations to the women. Congratulations to the WNBA. I know there are a lot of people that say that maybe the game doesn't have what the NBA has, but give them some time and they also can find a way to win the hearts and minds of America's sports fans. It just takes time and it takes support. Also, I want to touch on another thing that's happening right now. If you look at tonight's NFL football, Baltimore Ravens at the Cincinnati Bengals tonight, Thursday Night Football, the rematch for the game that did Baltimore wrong last year, got them actually knocked out of the playoffs and opened the door for Buffalo to get in. So that's a lot of emotion that should be in the stadium tonight. Dalton going up against Flacco. I think quarterbacks get a lot of credit. They also get a lot of blame when their teams lose. But that's a game watch the quarterback play tonight. I think that's going to be a telltale on what team wins that. The San Francisco Giants in Major League Baseball, they've lost 11 games in a row. Now the longest losing streak since 1951. I'm talking about McCovey Cove territory, Willie Mays, the Say He Can't territory, before they even played there. Guys like Juan Marichal. They just retired Barry Bonds' jersey earlier this August. And now Bochy, who has 3 World Series championships, a little bit on the hot seat for the San Francisco Giants because they're on an 11-game losing streak. And this is a year that people thought they would compete. I know they've been riddled with injuries throughout the season. They also got rid of McCutchen. He's now on the East Coast. And they just had their injuries just like a lot of other people have. I still believe in Bochy. I'd love to see him have at least another year in San Francisco to turn things around. I challenge anyone to find a manager that has 3 World Series championships that doesn't get a little bit more, leniency when it comes to letting somebody go. On the East Coast, the Boston Red Sox won the 100th game. Congratulations to the good old boys from Beantown. Last night, how many games will it be to end up winning this season? I think when you look at the Red Sox, we talk about it all the time. There's something about Fenway Park, how rustic that stadium is. It doesn't smell clean in all spots. You get on a New York City or Boston subway. Sometimes it just doesn't smell all that clean. But there's a history to it. It's like an old shoe. It may not smell good, but boy, Big C, does it feel good on your feet. And there's something about Fenway Park. It's not like the new Yankee Stadium. It doesn't have all the great smelling bleachers and all the things that people love in a new stadium. But for an older rustic stadium, I still love Fenway Park. It has a charm of its own, so congratulations to the mighty Boston Red Sox for a team that's won 100 games, and I'm sure they will have a lot more wins before the end of the season is over. And we know that a lot of the times when we think about a team like the Boston Red Sox and they're winning what they've done this season, there's a lot going on in the Beantown of Boston. I think Big C has been out doing some work monitoring the storm that's going on in the South, but he is calling in just to give us his thought, and then we'll ask him a little bit too about the update. Now, Big C, we know you fish a lot. We know you're out there. You know, you're down south dealing with the weather that a lot of people are watching on the CNN News tonight. Just want to get your thoughts on, do you think enough people have heeded the warnings to get away from the Carolinas, if that's at all possible? Big C, your thoughts? And I think we have Big C coming in now. I know we're having some weather problems back there. Big C, were you able to get just an observation? I know we were talking about CNN News. There was Chris Cuomo. There was also Don Lemon. They were out just kind of surveying the area. What have you seen a little bit from afar? But your thoughts, have enough people gotten out of the danger zone? Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, hopefully so. But those people who did not get out, it's too late for them to leave, and they're going to have to ride out the storm. I mean, there's been some catastrophic damage already. The water levels are really high. There's flooding that's going on, Charlton. So there's going to be a lot of loss of property, and hopefully not any loss of life. The first responders have done a marvelous job of prepping stage areas, Charlton, to be prepared to go in for after this devastating hurricane hitting land, Charlton. But, the biggest problem is they're expecting anywhere from 20 to 40 inches of rain in some places, and that's something that you can never prepare for, Charlton. That amount of rainfall, because that water has to go somewhere.
Yeah.
And when it's inland, Charlton, it's going to be trapped, and a lot of devastation is going to occur.
Yeah, and I was just saying how I opened up the show, Big C, talking about how people respond to natural disasters. We had the Loma Prieta earthquake here in Northern California, out here in the Bay Area back in 1989. What they did when they found out what happened. A lot of people become what they really are. They become helpers. Like, am I my brother's keeper? And we all found a way to check on our neighbors, made sure that people donated food and clothing and non-perishable food items, making sure that we did our part, even though we may not be fire departments and Coast Guard, etc., or FEMA, but a lot of people did a lot on their end to see if they could help out. Have you seen some of that happening to Big C down south in your neck of the woods?
Oh, yeah, Charlton. One of the greatest things that you have down in times like this, the natural disasters, you have this thing called the Cajun Navy.
Yeah.
That all these boaters come in from Louisiana and lower lining areas that have these airboats, Charlton, that allow them to go into low-lying areas, Charlton, and help people evacuate.
Yeah.
This is the human spirit. We always hear this phrase, from certain people talk about make America great, Charlton. America's always been great. You have Americans helping Americans, at no charge. They're not being paid for their generosity, Charlton. This dime is on their own back.
Yeah.
So they pay for their own transportation.
Yeah.
They bring their boats in, Charlton. They're paying for all their fuel and everything else that they're going to need. They're not asking for somebody to pay for this. This is what America's great about, Charlton. So when you take the politics out of stuff and you think about FEMA, FEMA is not always there to help, because, FEMA's head today came under investigation for using funds and FEMA transportation to go back and forth home with.
Oh, really?
So instead of him putting funds into FEMA, Charlton, he's using it for personal use, as well as the president when he took $10 million away from FEMA, Charlton, to give it to ICE to house illegal immigrant children, Charlton, instead of leaving it for the aid of those. And we're just entering the hurricane season, Charlton.
Yeah.
So this is just the first. There's going to be many more. But when you're taking funds from a disaster relief so that you can lock up people, Charlton, I mean, these are the things that the American people ought to know. When you look at his base, a lot of his base is in this area where the devastation is going to occur.
I know it.
And so when the funds are not there to help you rebuild, who are you going to blame? You going to blame an illegal immigrant, or are you going to blame the guy that says he has your back?
Big C, that's I had no idea. I heard about the head of FEMA taking some money, but you hear all kind of things, but that's really disheartening news.
Charlton, we talk about FEMA. Not only that, they took $29 million from the Coast Guard.
What?
Who is there in times of need in waterfront disasters, Charlton? The Coast Guard is going to have to be there with helicopter relief, Charlton, and aid during this storm. when you take $29 million from the Coast Guard, you take $10 million from FEMA. That's basically taking $40 million from disaster relief.
Yeah.
From Americans, Charlton. And when you say that you're here to help Americans, you take $29 million from the Coast Guard,
wow.
$10 million from FEMA. Those are the people that's going to need it. We talk about sports. We talk about the copious contracts that athletes get, Charlton.
Yep.
But these are relief agencies that are there for Americans, that are supposed to be there for Americans. Now they're underfunded, Charlton, because we have an administration that's skimming money.
Yeah.
And not telling the American public what they're doing. So when they have these shortfalls after these storms, Charlton, I guess he's going to give himself an A grade again like he did in Puerto Rico.
Yeah, that's horrible. And I talked about earlier with Puerto Rico how actually we're saying there was like between 8 and 64 fatalities that happened with that hurricane that hit Puerto Rico. George Washington University and Harvard University, as well as other well-known institutions that study natural disasters. And especially when you deal with the EMTs that are on the way to help people, and whether it's Coast Guard or FEMA, there were reported about 2,975 fatalities based on that. And I thought that was very painful to the people who've actually lost loved ones and who were being told that, no, you really didn't lose a loved one because we only lost 8 to 64 people. That's just,
Charlton,
yeah.
All you had to do was look at the landscape of Puerto Rico.
Yeah.
And know that there was a massive loss of life in excess of 1,000 just from the initial overview of the island.
Yeah.
I guess the most disheartening thing, even beyond the loss of life down there, Charlton, is that FEMA, they have an emergency burial fund.
Yeah.
For families in time of situations like this. And we just talked about $10 million being taken away from FEMA.
Yeah.
Is that over 2,000 people applied for emergency burial funds to bury loved ones that were lost.
Wow.
In the hurricane. FEMA denied all but 75. Think about that.
Wow.
They denied all but 75 because they said the official death toll was only 64.
Wow.
This was our federal government led by POTUS devoiding American taxpayers of funds that should have been available for them in time of the devastation. If you were to fly over Puerto Rico right now, Charlton, half of the roofs down there still have a blue tarp over.
Yeah.
A blue tarp. Because you're saying that we don't have the funds to assist.
Yeah.
And they keep saying, well, Puerto Rico's an island nation. That just didn't show up last week, okay?
Yep.
Puerto Rico's always been an island nation, just like Hawaii, Charlton.
Yeah.
But you chose not to go to Puerto Rico with this aid because they were one of those S-hole countries, Charlton.
Yeah, I remember that.
You talked about.
Yeah.
And so you labeled Puerto Rico, and they are American citizens. They pay taxes. But you don't want to aid these American citizens because of their complexion.
Yeah. I just think that's, just even, I opened talking about doing the show, and I know you were out doing some surveying and seeing what you could do to help people. And I challenge anybody to say that, well, it's not my problem. Big C was out doing what he could in his own region to see if he could be of help to people doing the show, and then just calling in to check in. So that's what Big C Sports does, but not just about get on the show and talk about sports and politics. He was out doing his thing the same way I was helping out in Northern California when we had some natural disasters. So, again, our hearts and prayers with everybody. Big C, I just want to finish up with a few things. I've already talked about baseball with the Giants losing 11 in a row. But I want to get your thoughts, too, on the Boston Red Sox, that hunt for Red October. They won a 100th game last night, and how many more will they win? We know baseball's better when the Red Sox are winning. Give me your thoughts as a Southern guy, and I know you probably have more affinity for the Southern teams, but your thoughts on baseball. With Boston being here, this is actually good for baseball, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, let me tell you something. Those Boston baked beans go good with barbecue, right? Well, so it's a marriage made in heaven. So don't think we don't care about those people up there in the Northeast, all right? We really care about them when we have time for a barbecue. When you think about Boston, Charlton, this is a team that's going to win at least another dozen games before the season is over.
Yeah.
This is a team that, you got two players on this roster that put Martinez and Betts that potentially could be the MVPs of the American League.
Yeah.
No one is playing better. Betts is right now number one. Martinez is number two.
Yeah.
I mean, they could even be co-MVPs. But, this organization from the pitching staff to the everyday players, Charlton, has just been phenomenal. And it's good for baseball. people say, you know, when you dominate something all the time, it becomes boring.
Yeah.
You know, Gino Auriemma's basketball team in UConn has never
They're
been
not boring.
All
No.
they do is just go out and dominate. And you go watch them
Yeah.
because they're good.
Yeah.
And you want to see if they have any flaws. It's not that they don't dominate people. You just want to see if they have any flaws. The Golden Warriors in basketball, people say, oh, well, they got too many superstars.
Right.
They have a sellout every night at home and on the road, y'all.
Yeah, that's
so
true.
You're not disgruntled about what they produce. And the same with Boston. There's a sellout every night
Yep.
at Fenway Park.
Yeah.
And they draw good on the road, Charlton, but they perform.
Yeah.
You know, you talk about these gentlemen of leisure that's playing a professional sport that kids play for free.
Yep.
But they play it like kids, Charlton. They play it with enthusiasm. They give their utmost every night for the fans. I mean, if you look at them in contrast to the Baltimore Orioles.
Yeah.
The Baltimore Orioles are 60 games out of first place.
Wow.
You think about that, 60 games out of first place. So Boston has won 100 games. Baltimore has won 40 games.
Wow.
So you think about the contrast, Charlton, in organization and players.
Yep.
Everybody goes out at the start of the game 0-0. It's a matter of who wants that game more, Charlton, in baseball, because every matchup is a one-on-one confrontation.
Yep. It is. I mean, that's part of what we were saying. I was just talking earlier about the San Francisco Giants. They've lost 11 games in a row. Their longest streak since dating back to 1951. That even precedes the great Willie Mays to say, hey, kid.
No, that was Willie Mays' rookie year.
Oh, it was his rookie year? Okay, his rookie year.
51 was his rookie year. So Willie Mays was there the last time that they had an 11-game winning streak, and he's still with the organization, Charlton.
And he
losing streak, brother.
Yeah, he turned things around, obviously. So you can always start on bottom. Sometimes it's how you finish, but I still love the way the Giants have built that great ballpark on McCovey Cove. I want to just finish up with some more, just a few thoughts from you, Big C. Wake Forest. I talked earlier about how some of the teams that canceled their college football games tonight are for the weekend, but Wake Forest at Boston College tonight, ACC versus the SEC, and that's a great setting where they're playing that game. But Big C, I know there's a lot of fans that are still, your hearts have to be thinking about, we're all Americans. When one family member hurts, all of us hurt. I know they might be playing with heavy hearts, but give me your thoughts on that matchup tonight, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, that game was moved up a day earlier and started at an earlier time in wake of a storm coming in, and no pun to Wake Forest.
Yeah.
But, you know, the game's in Carolina, so, but, you know, they wanted to get this game played, Charlton, because fans and players had, you know, planned for this.
Yeah.
And, you know, luckily enough, they're far enough inland, Charlton, where the storm won't affect them, Charlton, and they'll be able to get out of the stadium before all that heavy rain comes in.
Yeah.
But, you know, this is college football at its finest. When you think about two great not financial, but education institutions, Charlton, Boston College and Wake Forest.
Yep.
Academics first. You know, it's like looking at Stanford and Harvard and schools of that nature, Charlton.
Yeah.
The academics of the players, when you think about the intelligence of the players that come out of there, and it's a great game tonight, Charlton. You know, these two combatants have been out there. They put a lot of points on the scoreboard. Both of them came into the game, Charlton, undefeated.
Yep.
And I think Boston's going to pull this game out tonight and go to 3-0 on the season, sitting up top of the ACC.
Well,
and, you know, they're going to have to face Clemson later on.
Yep, they got to be ready for that game. Let me get your thoughts real quickly on the NFL tonight. Baltimore at Cincinnati. Great Thursday night matchup. We know they had a lot to do with Buffalo getting into the playoffs last year. And just want to get your thoughts on Dalton versus Flacco and how they're playing that game. I know they still have their thoughts and prayers with the people in the Carolinas, but give me your thoughts on that NFL matchup tonight, Big C.
Well, you know, you think about it, you know, Baltimore is 5-0, you know, Flacco in primetime games.
Yeah.
So this is the time when he shines. And so when you think about what they did, but that was Buffalo last week that they hung 47 points on, Charlton.
Yeah.
You know, a team without a quarterback, you know, kind of an unfair advantage.
Yeah.
But, you know, these two combatants went together last year, Charlton, in the final game of the season where Cincinnati pulled out that miraculous pass play and knocked Baltimore out of the playoffs and catapulted Buffalo. So, you know, it's ironic that all three teams had something to do with each other in the first 2 weeks of the NFL season. Flacco is playing like a quarterback rejuvenated. He has a new receiving core, so he's getting the ball down the field. Andy Dalton looked like the red rifle from his second year in the NFL, Charlton. It's the guy that everybody thought would lift Cincinnati to new heights.
Yeah.
So this is a challenge for both of these teams, Charlton. They both have tremendous defenses, you know, playing in the same division. So I really like Cincinnati on the road. They haven't played well under Dalton on the road, but I think they're going to do enough with Marvin Lewis tonight to get over the hump because Cincinnati's offense is not Buffalo's offense.
Not Buffalo's at all, Big C. I want to just mention two more things about NFL football. Both Ben Roethlisberger and Aaron Rodgers, they missed practice today. Will either of them miss their game on Sunday, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, when I look at Ben, I think Ben's ego's hurt more than his elbow is hurt. We talked about him averaging 4 interceptions a game in his last 2 games. That's Nathan Peterman territory.
Hey, Nathan Peterman feels better now,
huh? So Nathan Peterman doesn't feel better either way. I don't throw any more interceptions than Ben Roethlisberger. So, you got to keep me in that category. You look at this Pittsburgh team, Charlton, and they've done a lot of things professionally unethical internally with the players. The talk that they're doing, the bashing of a teammate, Charlton, throwing them under the bus, backing up, running up over them again, Charlton. These are things you don't do in professional sports. Everybody's in that industry to make as much money as they can. And your body is your business. So you protect it and you promote it however that you can. What Le'Veon Bell is doing is he's doing for himself. I think, Le'Veon Bell at the end of this season, Charlton, will end up in New York with the Jets. I think he will be one of Sam Darnold's weapons in years to come, Charlton. Because the Jets have money. They have salary cap money, over $90,000 in salary cap money next year.
Like $90 million,
so
I think.
I never see a trade being facilitated or him just going there as a free agent. When I look at Aaron Rodgers, I question whether he should play. We talked about Phillip Rivers playing a couple years ago in an AFC Championship game with a torn, ligament in his knee, Charlton. But that was a different thing. That was either going to be the last game of the season or he was going to get a couple of weeks to wait, and rest for the Super Bowl. Aaron Rodgers has to look at the long haul. I know that you're playing the Vikings. You're playing a division rival, Charlton. But this is a team with one of the best defenses in all pro football, one of the top 5 defenses in all pro football. They will get after you, Charlton. Aaron Rodgers' mobility will not be there. We saw how he limped and hopped up and down the field on that Monday night game, Charlton. Even with rest and knee ligament problems, Charlton, even though he'll take the needle, he won't be healthy.
No.
He's going to be cautious about throwing the ball. So, but I guess when you look at Green Bay, what do you have? DeShone Kizer? That's an interception waiting to happen.
He could join the Buffalo Bills. He throws so many picks. Last thing we'll close out on before I just get your thoughts again on the weather. The NHL preseason, Big C, for the good old boys up in Canada. It opens the preseason this Saturday. The Capitals open up on Sunday. The Stanley Cup champions. I think Ovechkin still has that good old boy vibranium in his Stanley Cup. Big C, the vibranium's gone, but he still has the cup. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, we're talking. They have to bring in a sanitizing company for the Stanley Cup. I hope there's no photos of all the things that Ovechkin has done with that cup. Because Lord Stanley might be turned over in his grave. But
I understand.
When we think about the overlapping of sports, you got Major League Baseball winding down. We got a month to go in the season before the playoffs start. We got the NFL just kicking off. College football in full bloom. The WNBA just celebrated a championship last night with the Storm. And winning their 3rd title since they've been in Seattle, Charlton. The winningest professional team in Seattle history. But we got the NHL, the longest running professional sport in North America, Charlton, up there on Frozen Pond. Kicking off. It's an exciting sport. Television can never justify hockey enough. You have to go sit into the arena. You have to hear the cutting of the ice, the slapping of that frozen puck, Charlton. It's just an electrifying sport, Charlton. And these guys, it's like baseball. It's always one-on-one. Like a tennis match. You're one-on-one with the puck and a defenseman, Charlton. And so with the NHL kicking off another season, Charlton, and Washington now finally having to defend its title, it's going to be a very interesting season.
Well, Big C, I know we have a lot that we've covered so far, and I really want to thank you for the time you put into making sure that you could do your part, just making sure neighbors are good, neighbors that you know, and neighbors that you don't know, doing a lot just to make sure that people are safe and have food to eat and all those good things that good people do. Back in the day, there was a man by the name of Drew Boudini Brown. He was known as Muhammad Ali's right-hand man. He would always tell Ali, with all you got to use, how can you lose? Rumble, young men rumble, Big C. What are you looking forward to in the sports universe?
Well, I think about the question you said, how can you lose? And I guess John Gruden would be number one on that list, y'all.
Yeah.
Who's going to be his scapegoat this week? You know, he got rid of Khalil Mack, saying that we didn't have a good defense when he was there, and, you know, it proved it even without him being there, they had a worse defense.
Yeah, horrible.
Now he's blaming, you know, Derek Carr,
yep,
for not being able to perform offensively. But you got to look at Amari Cooper, Charlton. Amari Cooper's last 10 games in the NFL. Last 10 games, he hasn't had more than 10 yards in reception.
Wow.
Think about that.
Wow.
In his last 10 games, has not had more than 10 yards in reception. Everybody knows John Gruden from his quarterback show, his quarterback whisper.
Yeah.
But that's a show sitting in a room, Charlton, watching videotape. The damn game is live the last I checked. You know.
It's not Madden 19, Big Z. That's for sure. I tell you, there's so much going on in the sports universe. We know that people are concerned about the safety of Americans dealing with the storm. We hope we can bring some levity to you, as we'll always try to do it every Monday through Friday at 5 and 6 p.m. worldwide. Follow Big C Sports on the Big C Sports Network, on the #1 network in the United States of America. And Big C Sports has been voted the #1 sports show in the universe, according to Big C and them good old boys down south. As we always tell you, there's never, ever any excuse for domestic violence. If you know any man or woman going through that garbage, please call 911, because no man or woman should ever have to deal with that garbage on their own. And as we always tell you on every Big C Sports show, we thank you, we appreciate you, and we hope that you have a super fantastic day.